Live from Illinois. It's Tim Kazurinsky. 40 years ago, the former not ready for primetime player helped give Saturday Night Live fans the gift of what's arguably the show's most famous Christmas episode ever. Airing on December 11, 1982, that evening's festivities were supposed to be hosted by Nick Nolte, who had just starred opposite breakout SNL star Eddie Murphy in Walter Hill's hit action comedy 48 Hours. But Nolte had to bow out, and Murphy took over MC duties, the first and still only time that a current member of the cast doubled as the host. We found out about Nick on Monday morning, Kazurinsky tells Yahoo Entertainment on the phone from his home in Evanston, just outside of Chicago. At the time, the story given to the viewing public was that the actor was too sick to fulfill his hosting duties. But Kazurinsky now says Nolte's illness wasn't viral in nature. He went into detox, which is why he couldn't do the show. He recalls, he was a hopeless alcoholic, which is not a surprise to anyone anymore. So then SNL producer Dick Ebersol said, "We're gonna have Eddie host the show." And the rest of us were like, why the hell not? Murphy's meteoric rise from SNL featured player to cast member or host had started 2 years earlier, when he made his first appearance on a November 22, 1980 episode that one of its own writers called the nadir of the show. By 1982, he was the star attraction in Studio 8 Hours, and the success of 48 Hours sent him even further into the stratosphere. Murphy cheekily acknowledged the career glow-up in the Christmas episode's cold open, Live from New York. It's the Eddie Murphy Show, he boasted with a grin. According to Kazurinsky, who joined SNL in 1981 as a writer and performer, and went on to have a scene-stealing role in the Police Academy franchise, the rest of the cast didn't take that joke personally. Eddie was a really sweet kid, and very generous. He says, he was always telling the producers, "I'm in the show too much." He was not greedy in that way, and we were grateful to have Eddie, because the show was losing sponsors at that time. Eddie was our golden ticket, so we were happy to have him host. SNL's 82 Christmas episode isn't the only Yuletide anniversary that Kazurinsky is celebrating this year. 10 years ago, the actor and writer had a small but memorable role in Scrooge and Marley, a 2012 retelling of the Charles Dickens classic A Christmas Carol that took place in the present day and recast Ebenezer Scrooge, played by David Pevsner, as a contemporary gay man who reconnects with the spirit of the season with the aid of 3 actual spirits. Kazurinsky plays Scrooge's former colleague, Jacob Marley, who sets him on his nightmarish nighttime journey. "I really had a blast doing it," he says of the low-budget production, which was shot in the Chicago area and features many actors from the city's vibrant theater scene. Kazurinsky was particularly excited by the overt embrace of LGBTQ themes that directors Richard Knight Jr.B. and Peter Neville brought to the original text. "That was sort of radical and innovative 10 years ago," admits Kazurinsky, who is married to fellow Chicago stage performer Marsha Lynn Watkins. "People would ask me, 'Are you gay?' I'd say, 'No,' and they'd say, 'Then why'd you do it?' And I always said, 'Well, you know, it's Charles Dickens, it's a pretty great story.'" In a lively interview, Kazurinsky opened up about his turbulent childhood in Australia, where he moved with his family at a young age, the jokes you could never tell on today's SNL, and why Police Academy is one of the few 80s franchises that probably won't get a reboot. "It was great fun. I was acting in a production of Hairspray at the time, and there was this one crazy day where there were electrical failures on set, and I had to be at the theater by 7:30. The filmmakers were begging me to stay, and we got the scene. But when I left, I was still in full Marley makeup with peeling latex skin and everything. I had to drive to the theater at 90 miles an hour with all that crazy makeup on. I looked like a zombie when I got there. The rest of the Hairspray cast had to help peel the latex off of my face and help me get dressed. I made it on stage with just 2 minutes to spare, so it was a wild time, but really fun to do." Do you have any aspirations to play Scrooge now that you've played Marley? "You know, I'm age appropriate for Scrooge now." Laughs, "But I'm not sure I can memorize all those lines. It's been a while since I've had to memorize an entire script. I'm 73, so I've been wondering about that. I don't know if we'll ever find out." A Christmas Carol is a classic for a reason. What's always been your favorite part of the story? What I've always loved the most about it is Tiny Tim. And not just because my name is Tim. I remember being indigent and poor when I was young. When I was 6, I spent a year in an orphanage in Australia. So I've always really identified with Tiny Tim. Why were you in an orphanage? I grew up in Australia until I was 16, and my mother had a nervous breakdown while we were there. All 5 kids ended up in an orphanage, and we were there for an entire year before she got out of the hospital. It left a mark, as they say. That's always been my link to Tiny Tim. I'm like, they have to take care of that boy. My kids are always on me to write down the story of my crazy life and crazy journey, because it's pretty wild. I also ended up with an ulcer when I was 14. My doctor said, "Your parents are drunks, so you've got to get out of the house as soon as you can." Back then, they thought ulcers were caused by stress, but they are actually caused by bacteria. But I was thankful for his advice, because I quit school, got a job, and when I turned 16, I ran off to America. America has been very good to me. I've led a charmed life since I got here. I started as a reporter in Pennsylvania, and then an ad man at the advertising agencies Leo Burnett and McCann Erickson. I actually went to Second City in Chicago to get over my fear of presenting my TV commercials to the heads of the agency. A year later, Second City offered me a job for an 80% pay cut, and I said, I'd be a fool to pass up this opportunity. Laughs. So I went to Second City and loved it. 3 years later, I ended up on Saturday Night Live. I'm one of the few people that never auditioned for the show, because John Belushi told Dick Ebersol to take a look at me on stage in Chicago. I didn't even know that until months later. Dick told me that John had recommended me.